Hey Ben, how are you?
Hey, doing well, Gary. So we're here on Saturday evening in White Plains, in the depths of winter, a few days after the solstice, and trying to spend this time looking at some of what's going on in White Plains.
Muy importante. See?
Yeah, muy importante.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming by. Love these talks. A lot of important things happening in White Plains, and today we want to particularly take a little bit of time to talk about the Galleria redevelopment, and in particular the draft environmental impact statement that is going to be considered at the Common Council hearing on January 6, 2025, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, look, we have some content in the video but January 6th is a public hearing, and it's apparently the only public hearing that's going to be held on this really critical issue that's affecting the city, which is what to do with the Galleria site.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So if I remember correctly, Commissioner Gomez said that this was the most consequential development in all of America, and you're saying there's only one hearing on the environmental impact?
Yeah, I went to a North Broadway Citizens Association annual meeting a few years ago, and Commissioner Gomez was there and made a comment that sounded a lot like that. The comment he made there might have been a little different, but It was like, this is one of the most valuable development sites in the country right now. And, like White Plains is a critically located city. It's so close to Manhattan. It has a train connection to Manhattan. And is there a little bit of hyperbole in there? Probably yes.
Yeah.
But it is important, and he's said it. So, frankly, it's disappointed me that January 6th is the only hearing they're planning to hold at the present time. It's in the depths of winter. People are on holidays. For some people, depending on when they celebrate Christmas, it might actually be during their holiday time.
Yep.
And it's close to Hanukkah. It's just people are often with family. They're in other states and other countries and stuff. It's just a little strange that, and it almost turns. It really frightens me. This is such a big, important project, and the decision is so irreversible. And there's this one hearing opportunity on one evening a few days from now. So
it's a little surprising. And when you say so big and so irreversible, it sounds to me like what you're saying is that the consequences of this development are going to impact the city's future for the foreseeable future. And I don't mean by foreseeable future 2 or 3 years. I mean decades, 40, 50, 60 or more years, right? So this is a big deal.
I can't even process it.
Yeah, it's that big a deal. Yeah.
I can't even process it. And there's so much else going on in the city. And actually, this is the amount of change that's being pushed through in relatively short order without that much careful inquiry is really high.
Very high. So we're going to talk a little bit about a few of the issues, but do we have an ask of the general public that's watching?
Our ask is that you come to the hearing on January 6th, City Hall, 255 Main Street, 7:30 p.m., and say what you'd like to say. And we can, kind of help with some brainstorming and provide our points of view, but our point is not to have some predefined set of talking points. It's to get the public out and to make this more of a public project.
Right. Does the citizens to be heard public portion start at 7:30, or that's at 7?
So yeah, that's a good point, Gary. Before every Common Council meeting, there's something called Citizens to be Heard, where any citizen can sign up and talk on any topic, and all you have to do is put your name on a little sign-up list that's distributed right before the meeting starts. So that starts at 7 p.m. But this is actually a little bit different. You certainly can talk in that period, as anyone can on any issue, but this is going to be folded into the meeting itself, which begins at 7:30, and this is a formal public hearing opportunity that will make a public record, and the developer will actually be asked to respond to the public comments. So it's something a little bit more formal than your typical.
So this is more of an interactive meeting as opposed to a typical Common Council meeting, which is not interactive, or is that the wrong way to put it?
Interactive is a funny word in terms of whether people would actually respond to concerns then and there that you might raise.
Yep.
I wouldn't get your hopes up too much, but based on what I've seen with other large developments in White Plains, it's very likely that the developer will be invited to present at the beginning when the hearing opens, and we could expect something like what they showed at the planning board meeting on December 17th, where they had a little slideshow about on what they're doing at what they want to do with the Galleria site and some of the environmental issues that they've looked into, supposedly. So we could expect that, and then the public would be invited to come up to the microphone one after another. Typically, the mayor says, does anyone from the public wish to speak? Sometimes a sign-up list is distributed that you fill in with a pen, and sometimes he just says, do you want to speak? And you raise your hand and come up, and that's what it'll be like. And you can submit written comments as well, and those will be held open for 10 days following the public hearing, the written public comment opportunity, which is important for folks who can't make it there.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, not everybody can make it, especially during holiday season, like you said. But can I ask some more questions just for clarification? So this public hearing is about the draft environmental impact statement. What is a draft environmental impact statement, and why is it on the agenda now? How does it relate to the overall redevelopment of the Galleria?
Well, we're fortunate that our camera can perceive these documents pretty well. So I'm trying to think how best to frame this, but the city gets to decide on this rezoning petition the developer has submitted. Should this land?
But I'm sorry to interrupt. What do you mean rezoning petition? Why does a private property owner submit a petition to rezone?
Well, they have submitted a petition to rezone these 11 acres in downtown White Plains, including 7 or 8 of the acres which they own, and the other acreage being the publicly owned parking garages. And they're saying that they want the city to rezone it to let them build massive density. They're far beyond what's allowed under current zoning and far beyond what's allowed under surrounding zoning. And why can they do that? I mean, that's actually a little bit beyond me.
So I know we started talking about the draft environmental impact statement that'll be at the public hearing on the 6th, but I want to talk about this for a minute because it's confusing. So you're saying that the current Galleria site, which is privately owned, the old Galleria Mall, but the parking garages are publicly owned. But this private developer has asked for rezoning on all of that, the private and the public. Yeah. And the reason is because they can't build what they want to build there?
Yeah, I mean, it's confounding on multiple levels. First, putting aside the parking garage issue, you'd normally kind of expect free market competition within defined zoning that comes, as part of a big picture plan where whole areas are zoned for certain densities and categories of uses, and people just have to play within the rules instead of getting special dispensation just for one developer. So that, makes me feel a little uneasy as a citizen. Yeah. But they're also saying that they want to incorporate the land where the public parking garages are located into their development. And both the garages themselves and the land underneath them are currently owned by the public. And they're saying they want the land to be repurposed for their development. And they don't own the land, and there's no concrete terms and conditions that have been proposed for how they'll acquire it or under what price. So it's
But we know one thing: the city's asked for permission to dispose of the parking garage without auction and sealed bids, and basically do it, and however they see fit. And it's not transparent as to how they see fit right now, other than there have been statements made that it should go to the private developer.
Yeah, it's been remarkable to follow, and we followed it closely. The city, at the last minute, brought forward resolutions at its common council meetings to in 2 summers, last summer and the summer before that. They had to do it both times to say that they're officially asking Albany, that is the state legislature, for permission to sell these public parking garages without public auction or sealed bids. It explicitly says that. Yeah. And the public has not been informed on what's going on, what will the price be, is it fair? Is it fair considering that the land is not only supposedly going to be transferred to the developer, but also rezoned to allow much more density?
Well, right. And so we've gotten off track a little bit. Let's get back to that point, because a lot of questions are coming to my mind, but I do want to talk about what this draft EIS is and why it's before the Common Council now. So we know that prior to this draft EIS, what required it is this request to rezone. It's a little baffling why a private property owner can ask to rezone publicly owned land, but let's put that issue aside for the minute. It also is a little baffling why it's happening this way. Why can't I or any other private property owner in the city just go to the Common Council and say, I want you to rezone my property so I can build a 30-story, 300-foot building? Probably not going to happen, but there's a question as to why it is happening here, because it's not consistent with current zoning. It's not consistent with the last comprehensive plan. But let's just talk for a minute about where we are. So we know that the draft EIS, or environmental impact statement, is a result of the requested rezoning. And what does that actually mean, if we can talk a little bit about that?
Right. I think one thing that could easily confuse people, and certainly confused me before I thought about it, is the city doesn't have to grant this rezoning that would rezone the land to allow way more density than the current zoning or even the surrounding zoning.
What is density?
That
I'm dense. That's not what you mean.
I'm getting fairly dense myself, but what we're talking about is just the amount of the height and volume of structures that would be put on the site. And one measure that I think we'll end up talking about in this video is called floor area ratio, which you've explained to me because you have some real estate background, is essentially the ratio of indoor square footage to the overall square footage of the land itself.
Right.
So the Galleria Mall and its parking garages are surrounded by land that's zoned in the CB4 zoning district, which is a very dense downtown kind of district that allows buildings well over 200 feet, office buildings. And what's interesting here is the developer wants to go not only above what the mall is zoned for, which is basically a two-story mall, but wants to go beyond even what CB4 allows. So it's really you could think of it as a density grab, and they want this density so they can build huge structures that they can then rent out to people.
Well, let me ask you a question. So I get all that, but why would the developer say, I own this mall and I want to build these large towers on it, to submit a site plan application showing their plans and ask for permission? Wouldn't that be the ordinary course?
Well, that site plan application would be summarily denied because it's not compliant with zoning.
Yeah, but the city has the right to grant variances.
Well, I think you might understand this better than me, as I don't have a whole depth of real estate experience, but I think of a variance as a relatively minor adjustment that's needed to conform your project.
So you're talking about bulk variances versus use variances, and you're right, generally speaking. However, sometimes variances can be more significant. To me, and this is my opinion, the reason that developers ask for a rezoning as opposed to submitting a site plan and asking for significant use and or bulk variances is because that it's subject to challenge, right? It's subject to the challenge by the general public or by neighboring property owners. And there's a certain legal threshold that must be met in order for the city to grant those variances. But when you rezone, and then the developer submits an application that complies with that new zoning, it's considered under the law an as-of-right development, and an as-of-right development is not discretionary. The city is required to approve it if you comply with all the regulations. So it sounds like when we back into it this way, this feels a little bit tailor-made, right?
Yeah. I mean, there is a conceptual development plan put forward by the developer in connection with its request to rezone the land. So they've been articulate about what they're saying they would like to build there, what its design would be like, what the buildings would be like, what the promenade down the middle would be like. But it is interesting that once they get the land rezoned, they might be able to change the nature of what they want to build there so that it doesn't precisely match the conceptual development plan. And I've seen that happen with some other projects in White Plains, like Hamilton Green, which I've been very vocal about.
But also what you're talking about is once the site plan approval is granted, those are called entitlements in the law, but they are locked in, and They belong to that land. They do not belong to the owner. So the property can be sold. All sorts of things can happen to that property, and those rights don't go away. They're financeable. They have real value in the market, and the developer can now come forward at a later date and say, well, look, you already gave me permission to do this. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do this instead. What leverage does the city have to say no, right? Because their entitlements have already been granted. And so it's a leverage game, it's a financing game, it is a value game. But at the end of the day, what happens once the rezoning is granted and then the site plan is approved is the city no longer has any leverage or power.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. And I have to say, I really wish the city staff would be articulate about this and break it down for people, have a public workshop or something, because we're trying to figure this out using the knowledge and the tools that we have, but they're not, like, what's their opinion on if a developer gets a rezoning with a conceptual development plan and then a little bit later comes and says they want to build something else that's compliant with the new zoning they got, can they just do it as of right? Does the city have any leverage? I'd love to hear the opinion of city staff, including in the corporation counsel's office, the legal office at City Hall, about whether they can do that. But instead, you and I in our spare time are trying to, and yes, we do come to the table with some, experience and knowledge that we picked up in life, but like we're trying to, figure these things out. And it's
absolutely, you raise a great point, because I would say that let's show the viewers here what the current plan is. Maybe better off holding this up than me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold it up and we'll okay, yeah.
Yeah. This is the current conceptual drawing. It's 7 towers.
Yeah, and we'll distribute a digital image at the same time we distribute the video, so people.
Right.
But usually our camera picks it up pretty well.
Right.
So you see these buildings and a promenade down through the middle of them with a pedestrian bridge over Martin Luther King Boulevard,
right.
which now has the Galleria really goes over Martin
really
Luther King.
Yeah.
So they'd kind of scale that back and have just a slender pedestrian bridge over it.
Right. But I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but the thing about this conceptual drawing is that it is not very friendly to Main Street, right? All of these buildings face into the promenade. Main Street. I think
that's Martine.
That's Martine.
Main Street
Main
is
Street's
here.
here. Sorry.
Yeah.
So Main Street here. Do I have this upside down? No, I don't.
Yeah.
But Main Street here. Main Street is going to be killed by this. This is an intentional design to bring all traffic into the interior of this redevelopment. And you've got Serafina and Vintage and Gaiku and these other restaurants and shops along Main Street that are all just going to die because there'll be nobody walking along Main Street anymore. They'll all be in this promenade area, right? So, that's a terrible design from a city perspective, right? If you are a person looking for exclusivity and privacy, maybe you like that design, but this development should be about what's best for the city of White Plains, not necessarily what's best for a few deep-pocketed individuals who will be able to afford these places.
Well, that's a pretty strong opinion, Gary. Well, I have to say there is an irony here because the city has long said they want to activate Main Street and want to build more of a corridor from the train station to downtown because, of course, using the train station instead of using a car is considered good, and I think it is socially good for people who are able to do it. It is a little bit of an irony that they've built the buildings so that basically Main Street just faces the back of these really tall buildings,
right.
And the attractive space that has some plantings and is kind of pedestrian oriented is not anywhere near Main Street. And these businesses on Main Street have long been, kind of had a precarious foothold there,
right.
Because I mean, the one thing I would agree with, not the one thing, one thing that I would agree with Mayor Roach about is that this area does need a little bit more of enlivening.
Absolutely.
And more of a...
Of course, the mayor's been saying that for a long time, and he's absolutely right. The problem, or at least in my opinion, is this is not the plan to activate Main Street. This is the plan to kill Main Street. But it can be fixed, right? I mean, if all of these buildings were simply turned 180 degrees so that there were street facing as opposed to promenade facing, well, now it's a different game, right? So that's one thing. The other thing here is when you look at this plan, it's from here, from Lexington, down this way, maybe up in this area, I don't remember exactly, but it's something like that. That is all the publicly owned parking garage. That is a lot of space. That is about 30, maybe 35% of this overall redevelopment site. This is the public safety building, so the police, fire, and this building is in need of repairs. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could build a new public safety building here? It's already city-owned land, and then we could build low and moderate income housing along here and activate Martin Avenue here, right? And you can have it street facing. You can create an entire really, really nice low and moderate income housing area. And guess what? That leaves an enormous amount of space here to be redeveloped by the private owners. It doesn't all have to be in the hands of a private developer.
Yeah, so the public safety building, you would know it as it's where the police station is located, and it's where the city court is located, and they have a courtroom where the judges will hold their proceedings there. It's on the corner of Martin and Lexington, and it really is in disrepair. And if you walk along the sidewalk there on Martin Avenue, you see this kind of temporary equipment, like, I don't know if it's a generator or
I think it's heat.
Yeah, so that, like something, you're probably right. They're not able to provide the infrastructure for the building inside because systems are broken. So they have this kind of metal box outside, and it's kind of an eyesore. So the idea is, maybe the fact that the public actually owns the parking structures in the underlying land, and maybe we could use that to find a solution to the situation with the public safety building.
Right. And if not, then the city really should be using its leverage over this development to really require a significant amount of low and moderate income housing, right? Because right now, the developer is saying, Ben, that they'll comply with the affordable housing ordinance, but that's pretty weak.
Yeah, so several years ago, the city put it, they've had an affordable housing ordinance on the books for a long time. They updated it, I believe, in 2019, and it says now the developments have to have either 8% or 12% of the rental units in them have to be so-called affordable units. And when they choose the 12% option, so 12% of the apartments in the building have to be these designated affordable apartments.
But affordable is not defined, right?
Well, it's defined as being affordable to people who make 80% of area median income.
And what does that mean?
Well,
the area median income takes in not just the city of White Plains, but surrounding areas, right?
Yeah.
And so, considering, I think Scarsdale is a part of that, although I'm not positive.
Well, the area median income for a family of four is over $150,000 right now. So right. You're basically housing people who have six-figure incomes in affordable housing.
Right. And this is the problem with that definition. Right. Yeah. So, right. But if we were at 50% of AMI, so we're looking at $75,000 incomes, that's becoming more realistic, right? But that's so to say that they will comply, but they're complying at an 80% AMI is not really bringing affordability to this. Not in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean I'm with you 100% because when you own a piece of land in a zone for one density and you get that density massively increased by the city, I mean you just got a valuable asset just from that single decision, and your land is worth more. You can borrow more money using it as collateral. So I think that it's very reasonable for the city to say you can do better than just the 12% that we normally require for any development that has rental units in it. I mean, even developments as few as a dozen apartments will have to follow these affordable housing regulations, and they're treating it no differently. And
so the second, I'm sorry, but the second, if I understand what you're saying, and I want to be sure that we get this clear, I think what you're saying is the second the city council approves a rezoning of this site, as soon as that vote occurs, they have just added hundreds of millions of dollars in value to the owner, right? They just gave them that value. Yeah. It's literally value creation. And then you're saying for that, the city should get something substantial in return related to affordable housing, not just the bare bones legally required minimum in the statute.
Yeah, and that doesn't even bring us to the issue of that the developer might acquire the public parking garages and the land underneath them.
Even more value being
for some price that may or may not be fair.
Correct.
But even more potential value created there. So I mean, in some ways we should be happy about the Galleria redevelopment. It's a huge public opportunity to do some good things, but I firmly believe if the public doesn't really get involved, that won't happen. So
Yeah, I agree with
I
you.
just think that.
And you raise a good point, because I don't want anyone to think that I think the same is true for you, Ben, that we're not in favor of a redevelopment of the Galleria Mall, right? It's an old mall, it's outdated. Redevelopment is appropriate. The question is what redevelopment is appropriate, right? Because you can go online and Google this and look at some YouTube videos of repurposed enclosed malls elsewhere in the country where they have turned stores and the interiors of malls into small homes. There's no reason why somebody can't take a 1,000 square foot retail space and live in it, right? You've got this enclosed, beautiful space. This is happening. I'm not making this up, right? Yeah. So you could fill the existing Galleria Mall with affordable housing units, right? That option is not being considered here, right? And to your point, Ben, huge, enormous value is going to be created for a private developer. There should be a lot more give back to the city in an affordable housing perspective at 50% AMI.
Yeah. I think it's I hope. I mean, it's something that one can easily express in a public hearing. I think
Yes.
that you could talk about. You might have in your life experiences trying to find housing, or have relatives who have had experiences trying to find decent, affordable housing, and talk about what the environment's really like, and propose that we could do better. And I think the public involvement does generally get a reaction. And
Right.
I'm certainly planning to do that myself.
Absolutely. And, going back to the beginning, January 6th, 7:30, even if you just show up and don't speak, there's still power in that. There's power in numbers. So please come on out. Let the city and the developer hear, see, and feel that there is a significant public interest, not in blocking the redevelopment, right? That is not the point. But the point is making it better, making it work for the city of White Plains, making it work for the working families who live here and call White Plains home. That is the key, right?
Yeah, and I think another topic worth talking about is, what do you want so-called publicly accessible open space to be? Because this project incorporates a lot of it, and you can see it's partially paved and has some plantings, and I'll show another figure. But what are your principles for how that should work? My principles are that it should have benches that have backs on them, not just like a little, and we've seen some pocket parks and other publicly accessible open spaces that are really not that attractive to actually use, and you kind of wonder, well, why are they even there? If they're going to be there, they should be there for people to inhabit the city. I live in an apartment building, and I would like more public spaces where I could go on a nice summer day and get a iced coffee and read a book. I mean, that's just nice. And so whatever you think should be there, whether you'd like to see more lawns and more green space, or whether you'd like to see certain kinds of benches or other arrangements or fountains or water features, I think that's well worth expressing in an opportunity like this.
Yeah.
Here in the depths of winter in the January 6th public hearing.
Yeah. So come on out.
Yeah.
We appreciate you listening. Anything else we should be talking about? I mean, this is really focused on the draft environmental impact statement in the January 6th public hearing. But we've touched upon a number of points, including the affordable housing, which is so important to this whole thing and cannot get lost in the weeds, right?
Yeah, there's a lot more worth talking about. I think we would never get to it all in the kind of short video we're trying to do, but I certainly have some technical concerns about whether the amount of sewage that'll be created by all these new apartments can be adequately absorbed by the city's existing sewage system, which actually may have some integrity issues, and other things like that. I mean, there's a lot going on here, and it's all happening, frankly, from my perspective, way too fast.
Yeah.
But I think, you can get a copy of this document online, the draft environmental impact statement, and look at all the renderings of the development from different perspectives and weigh in on it. And we'll continue to update you with more videos like this, where we try to look at the project from different perspectives.
And do we have an email they can submit written comments to if they can't come to the meeting?
Yes, there's a public notice out there, and I don't actually recall what email it says in it, but if you contact me, I'll get it to you. But I also wanted to recommend that people, especially if you're in a position where you can't make it on January 6th, I think it would be very good to ask the city formally for more public hearings. This is going to be with us for decades and decades to come. What's the harm in holding one other public hearing or two other public hearings? And mayor's office at whiteplainsny.com is the
.gov.
.gov. Did I get it wrong? We'll make sure to have the correct one in the post with this video. But if you email the mayor's office, that's a way that you just. I mean, I'm begging you, please email the mayor's office and say, could we structure these hearings so there's more than one hearing opportunity?
Yeah, that'd be great. The public deserves to be heard, and you know what? The city council members deserve time to think about what the public has to say too.
Well, thank you, folks.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, and good night.
Good night.